conducted an extensive criminal investigation, and the SEC conducted a parallel civil investigation. Today, my office is announcing the filing of federal criminal charges alleging that Ms. Alguin Jr. and Mr. Soberall, starting at the latest in January 2022, conspired to commit wire fraud, lying to board members, investors, lenders, and others about Bitwise's financial condition to obtain investment money and loans. The loss due to the defendant's fraud exceeds $100 million. As detailed in the agent's affidavit filed in support of the complaint in this case, in 2013, Alguin Jr. and Soberall founded the startup company that became Bitwise. Their stated goals were to create job opportunities for underserved groups of people, to revitalize blighted urban areas, and to show that such a project could be profitable. Bitwise ultimately had three business lines: a workforce training program that prepared apprentices for technology jobs, a consulting service that developed software and websites, staffed call centers, and provided related services, and a real estate arm that bought, renovated, and leased commercial properties. Bitwise grew quickly by obtaining and deploying tens of millions of dollars of investment funds. By the end of 2021, it had raised more than $70 million in investments and had grown to have 400 to 500 employees and 100 to 300 apprentices in multiple offices and states. However, Bitwise's business model wasn't generating the revenue that would justify the money that had been invested, and the company's substantial expenses easily outpaced that revenue. Despite the massive influx of investment money into the business, Bitwise's financial condition worsened. Instead of acknowledging that the business was failing to achieve the hoped-for returns, the defendants, Alguin Jr. and Soberall, repeatedly lied to the board of directors, investors, lenders, and others about the business's revenues and financial condition. For example, to obtain an additional $5 million investment from one investor, the defendants altered bank statements by inflating the amount of cash Bitwise had in its account by tens of millions of dollars and provided the altered statements to the investor. The defendants provided similar false numbers to other investors to obtain additional investments and to the board of directors to allow them to continue running the company. Now, pages 16 to 17 of the complaint affidavit contain some altered bank statements that show as an example, and we've blown them up here to make the point. These are bank statements for Bitwise Industries for the period ending December 31st, 2021 and March 31st, 2022. If you look here, excuse me, this is the altered bank statement for December 2021, and right below it is the altered bank statement for March 2022. The FBI and IRS CI obtained the actual bank statements from the banks, and you can see the differences in the amounts. So for the December statement, what was provided to investors, and this comes directly from an email that was sent to an investor with this attachment, the cash ending balance for Bitwise's bank account is shown to be over $42 million. In fact, as the actual bank statement obtained from the bank shows, Bitwise at that time had a little over $11 million, so much less. In March, just 3 months later, the altered bank statement that they provided investors showed an ending cash balance of over $23 million. But the actual bank statement showed only $325,000. When one investor's representative asked for the results of a third-party audit of Bitwise's finances, Mr. Soberall told him the audit was still in progress. In fact, the audit had already been completed, and it did not support the statements the defendants were making about the company's financial condition. When Mr. Sobral later provided the audit report to the investor, the defendants had altered its date to make it appear it was only recently completed after the additional investments already had been made. The defendants provided another investor with the same audit report with the completion date altered and with the revenue for the year 2020 increased by over $20 million, and that year's net loss decreased by over $16 million. The defendants falsely told a joint venture partner that Bitwise was receiving a large investment from an investor, all to induce the joint venture partner to put $35 million into the real estate side of Bitwise's operations. When the joint venture partner became suspicious, the defendants provided the same altered bank statements they had created to mislead investors about how much cash the company had on hand. As Bitwise's financial condition worsened early this year, the defendants misrepresented the company's finances to several businesses and people to obtain millions more in loans, including from their business partners, board members, and employees and their employees' families and friends. For example, the defendants persuaded one investor to loan them $10 million by claiming Bitwise had about $80 million on hand in cash but was having difficulty with a line of credit. In fact, Bitwise had less than $5 million in cash at the time. As another example, the defendants persuaded a lender to loan them over $20 million by putting up Bitwise's buildings as collateral. In fact, the defendants had sold those buildings to someone else, and Bitwise no longer owned them, and therefore could not use them as collateral for a loan. The defendants lied to obtain all these loans, despite knowing that the company was failing. They were simply unable to acknowledge to themselves, their board, and their employees that the business model they had devised, a model that was paying them annual salaries of $600,000 each, wasn't working. The defendants should have admitted failure and either ended or at least changed the business model. Instead, they lied to and misled others about how the business was doing to obtain tens of millions of more dollars to keep the business afloat a while longer, increasing the ultimate loss. With the failure of Bitwise, investors and lenders are out over $100 million, and about 900 employees and apprentices are out of work. Today's charges are a first step in holding defendants Olwin Jr. and Sobral accountable for their criminal conduct. I want to thank our law enforcement partners at the FBI and IRS criminal investigations for their hard work on this investigation that led to the charges announced today. I also want to thank the Assistant U.S. Attorneys in my office for their hard work on this investigation, Assistant U.S. Attorneys Joe Barton and Henry Carbajal. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Assistant Special Agent in Charge Crosby Brackett of the FBI.
Thank you. As the U.S. Attorney noted, we are here today because of the actions of Jake Sobral and Irma Olguin Jr. When corporate executives engage in deceptive practices, it can have far-reaching consequences, including erosion in trust in their business sector and their specific company. And it all often leads to the company's demise. This is exactly what happened at Bitwise. Throughout this investigation, the interagency investigation comprised of special agents and support personnel from both the FBI and IRS gathered and uncovered overwhelming evidence that Jake Sobral and Irma Olguin Jr. orchestrated a multifaceted scheme which involved over $100 million in fraud. The result of their actions was the inevitable collapse of what was an unsustainable Ponzi scheme. This case underscores the FBI's unwavering commitment to collaborate with other law enforcement agencies to uncover corporate misconduct and hold wrongdoers accountable. This could not have been possible without the strong partnerships with the United States Attorney's Office and IRS criminal investigations. These critical partnerships empower us to address increasingly complex financial fraud schemes. To avoid these types of crimes, companies should implement robust oversight measures, things such as routine audits and anonymous channels where employees can report misconduct. Strong compliance programs and ethical leadership do make a difference. The FBI believes in fairness, transparency, and justice. We will relentlessly pursue those who engage in financial transgressions. Holding leaders accountable for fraud is paramount in breaking the cycle of financial crimes. We encourage the public to report suspicious activity to tips.fbi.gov or 1-800-CALL-FBI. Together, we can make a difference. I'd now like to turn it over to Mark Silva, Acting Special Agent in charge of the IRS Criminal Investigations.
Good afternoon. As mentioned, my name is Mark Silva. I'm the Acting Special Agent in charge for the Oakland Field Office, IRS Criminal Investigation. I would like to thank the United States Attorney's Office, the FBI, and the Securities and Exchange Commission for their commitment to this case, and for all of you for your continued interest in this case and its ongoing impact to the people here in the Central California and around the country. The accused allegedly misrepresented the company's assets by tens of millions of dollars for the purpose of fraudulently obtaining additional finances from lenders and investors. These alleged misrepresentations not only victimize lenders and investors, but more importantly, hundreds of families across the country. These activities are examples of all too often frequent white-collar crimes perpetrated across the country. IRS Criminal Investigation is dedicated to pursuing individuals involved in these types of financial crimes. We cannot do this work alone. Over 25% of our investigations are worked in partnership with other federal law enforcement agencies. IRS Criminal Investigation Special Agents work closely with FBI agents to investigate this complex financial scheme. This partnership allowed for the wrongdoers to be brought to justice in this case. I would like to thank the IRS Criminal Investigation Special Agents and investigative analysts in the Fresno office who assisted with this investigation. Their financial investigative expertise and enthusiasm in pursuing this complex financial crime fosters confidence in our nation's financial system. I would now like to turn it over to Monique with the Securities and Exchange Commission.
Thank you, Acting Special Agent in Charge Silva, and good afternoon, everyone. Today, the SEC filed charges against Jake Soberall and Irma Olguin Jr. In our complaint, we allege that they swindled investors out of tens of millions of dollars by repeatedly lying about Bitwise's key financial metrics. Soberall and Olguin's alleged lies set out in the complaint were striking. They lied about how much revenue Bitwise generated. They lied about how much cash it had on hand. They lied about Bitwise's audit. They even doctored important documents like bank statements before providing them to investors. These were not small exaggerations. As we allege in our complaint, Soberall and Olguin's fabrications were significant. In one instance, they said that a company bank account had over $23 million. In reality, that account had just over $300,000. That is just one example of clear fraud alleged in the complaint. The SEC alleges that Soberall and Olguin told these lies because they knew that investors would not have invested in Bitwise if they knew the truth about its poor financial condition. Soberall and Olguin took advantage of investors who believed that their money was supporting a business that was financially healthy and doing positive work for the social good. Soberall and Olguin's scheme also caused significant harm to this community. Bitwise was a highly visible business here. When Soberall and Olguin's fraud was revealed, everyone at Bitwise lost their jobs without any notice. This unfortunate case illustrates the SEC's important role in holding bad actors accountable and deterring similar frauds. I'd like to recognize the team from the SEC responsible for today's action: Drew Liming, Rahul Kahatkar, Mark Katz, John Rosigno, and Jason Lee. I'd also like to thank U.S. Attorney Talbert and our law enforcement colleagues. This case is a great example of our long-standing partnerships with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of California, the FBI, and the IRS criminal investigation. I'm very proud of our work in this case. I'd like to remind everyone to please notify the SEC if you see frauds like this one. We are dedicated to protecting the public, and we rely on your assistance to identify potential frauds. Thank you.
Any questions for us? Yes.
Do we know where this $100 million went and can't be recovered?
The investigation's continuing on that. As the complaint affidavit details, a fair amount was spent on salaries. Beyond that, I'm not going to provide more information outside the complaint.
Would there be more charges against Miley and all the other upper management and maybe even the board of directors?
And I'm not going to comment on further charges against additional individuals. Today we charged these two individuals, the two co-founders and co-CEOs, very serious charges, charged by complaint. So we'll see how this plays out over time.
Has any of your offices interviewed them during the course of the investigation?
I'm not going to comment on that. Beyond what's in the affidavit, I'd refer you to the affidavit as far as what's been released publicly on who has been interviewed.
Will you be seeking detention, or do you think there might be a flight risk?
And I won't comment on that. The court appearance is going to start at 2 o'clock, so our position will be made known at that time with respect to detention or release.
Do we know where Olguin and Soberall been hiding out for the last 4 or 5 months?
And I won't comment on that as part of the investigation.
Can you tell us, did you receive any tips before all this went down?
I think I'd ask FBI if there's anything publicly you can say about how the investigation started.
Not at this time.
Okay, thanks.
Is there any chance to seize their personal assets? I know allegedly you have homes all over the place, Olguin and Soberall. Are those in jeopardy?
I can say we're looking at financial assets. Obviously, a big part of our criminal case is in taking the profit out of crime. And so we will be looking at all potential assets and other materials for both forfeiture and or restitution.
The court might touch on this, but has any bail been set, or they're currently in custody, correct?
They're currently in federal law enforcement agency custody. They will appear at 2 o'clock, and the judge will decide whether they'll stay in custody or not at that time.
Can you just touch again on the people impacted here in Fresno? Really just trying to seek justice for them.
Right, and you know this obviously Bitwise grew very fast. The promise of having a technology company located here in Fresno that would benefit underserved parts of the community, the spread of that idea to places like Bakersfield and then really across the country to other offices. There was a lot of promise there, but as we've seen, the promises were not backed up. The business model didn't work. The defendants had every reason to know that for a period of time, and after taking in all of that $70 million of investment money that I mentioned, they even then they had choices on what to do, and they chose to essentially double down and lie to get another $30 million or more of loans to try to keep the company afloat a little bit longer, when obviously it was going to fail based on lack of revenues and high high expenses. So there are a lot of people that are out, out of work because of it, with really no notice to them, as far as the workers, families that counted on that income coming in, and I think a community that hoped that that dream really was real, that the company could survive and provide those sorts of services here in the Central Valley.
Let me ask you, Mr. U.S. Attorney David Todd, Chief Legal Officer. Where does this rank for this office in terms of fraud cases? 100 million, that's got to be up there for number one.
It's a big one. We were talking about this. We've prosecuted a case that has some similarities, some differences in our Sacramento division. The DC Solar case. It was a Benicia-based company. That one, the total fraud was about $1 billion, so more. But it's only because we've prosecuted that case that we have that comparison. $100 million is a lot of money that the fraud took in part because the investors provide a lot of money based on the lies that we've seen. So this is a significant fraud case for this office to prosecute. Anything else?
Who should have known and when? And if you could touch on again when your criminal investigation started.
I don't think we'll touch on that piece as far as when it started, but as far as who should have known, look, the problem here is the defendants were lying to everybody. As you see, lying to board members, lying to investors, lying to employees, lying to, as the affidavit spells out, lying to their own CFO and others who relied on bank statements and audit reports that they intentionally altered to hide the truth. So this wasn't one simple lie. This was a series of lies backed up with false documentation in order to get all of this money.
Can you say how many people were investigated or questioned in the case, or was there any whistleblower that helped you guys?
And I don't think we can comment on that either. So, sorry. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming today. Appreciate it. As I mentioned, it'll be Judge Alberto's courtroom at 2 o'clock will be the initial appearance for the two defendants. Thank you.